you can feel it in the air, can't you? Another year has just completely flown by.
Joe.
I was just looking back at our old stuff, and I realized we are almost 2 years into this Sip and Talk journey.
To be precise, 371 days have passed since EP46.
Oh my God.
Statistically speaking, 2 years means a podcast has passed its highest risk period for early failure. So this is cause for some mild celebration.
Jeez.
But don't you find that humans attribute far too much, unnecessary sentimentality to the simple fact of orbiting a star one more time?
Oh, you are such a buzzkill. That is called ritual, my friend. And that leads us perfectly into our topic today.
Okay.
Last year, we talked about where Christmas came from. This year, we have to talk about where it's going. I've been scrolling through social media, and this holiday is still a massive point of controversy in some places.
You're referring to the debate around cultural invasion, right?
Exactly. That classic online fight that just never seems to die. Can Chinese people celebrate Christmas? That conversation gets louder than our own comment section, and that is saying something.
It is a fascinating sociological observation. You're right. You see this collision of two massive forces.
Yeah.
On one side, you have the unstoppable tide of globalized consumerism. And on the other, you have this really potent mix of nationalist anxiety and cultural defense.
So before we really jump into the debate, we should probably frame this for our Sip and Talkers. The big challenge for Santa in 2025 is navigating a world where he basically has to pick a side.
Precisely. We're going to take an inventory of global cultural exchanges today, and the key question is this. When a global symbol like Santa travels, is that exchange an invasion, a fusion, or something else, a distortion? It's time to find out.
Absolutely. And Merry Christmas to everyone listening. We are definitely not taking a break for the holidays.
No, we are not.
And yes, the eggnog is ready to go.
One of our listeners commented that we're far too productive and that the content of every deep dive teaches them a lot.
Well, thank you, dear listener. We really appreciate that. As we always say, with great power comes great responsibility. Ha ha. Merry Christmas to you. Today we are diving into
I wish you guys
Christmas.
can see his face.
No. Okay, start again. Christmas in the culture war. Whose side is Santa really on? Okay, so you said Santa has to pick a side. The image is just, it's ridiculous. I'm picturing this jolly old man checking geopolitical maps and making sure his reindeer's GPS has no fly zones marked. But the actual concept, this dual loyalty dilemma for a cultural symbol, that's serious, isn't it?
It is. While he technically maintains North Pole neutrality, at least we assume he does, on the Earth of 2025, Santa is caught in this classic conflict.
Yeah.
A globalized symbol is being pulled apart by geopolitical division, and it's primarily centered on that U.S. versus China dynamic.
It just shows how easily something as, fluffy as a Christmas tree can become a weapon in identity politics.
Exactly.
To really get it, we need to define the two main battlefronts where Santa is getting all this political heat. What are the stakes on either side?
We can define them by how they look at global culture. And they're basically mirror image problems.
Right.
First, in China, the perception held by the state and, large parts of the nationalist public is that Christmas is the Trojan horse of Western cultural invasion.
The Trojan horse.
It's not seen as just a harmless secular shopping day. It's interpreted as a deliberate tool for transmitting foreign values.
Right.
Often subtly anti-authoritarian or anti-communist values to the younger generations. The conflict is ideological, but it's fought with imported tinsel and Santa hats.
So it's not just about shopping. It's about youth indoctrination dressed up in red velvet.
Precisely. And then you have the completely inverted perspective that dominates the debate in the West.
Okay, so what's that?
In the United States, Christmas is increasingly viewed by a powerful, very vocal segment of society as the last fortress of conservative traditional values.
The last fortress.
The conflict here isn't foreign versus domestic. It's progressive inclusion versus conservative tradition, a really polarized internal fight to maintain what they see as the religious and cultural bedrock of the nation.
Against what?
Against what they perceive as, corrosive secularism and social liberalization.
But hold on. If China sees Christmas as an invading force trying to undermine their identity, how can the U.S. simultaneously frame it as a core identity that's under attack? Isn't that a huge contradiction in what Santa is supposed to be globally?
It is the ultimate irony. The poor old guy whose only real job is delivering mass-produced consumer goods—
Made in Asia, by the way.
Made primarily in Asia, is stuck between two political extremes. In Beijing's framing, he's too imperialist.
Right.
In Washington's culture war framing, he's often seen as not religious or traditional enough.
So the mission for us today becomes really clear. We need to look at how these global cultural symbols, from Santa to anime, are being interpreted. Not as just an exchange, but as invasion, fusion, or distortion, depending entirely on which political system is using the holiday to define itself. Okay, let's start on that Eastern Front. Every single year, like clockwork, we see these reports about a Chinese boycott. I see pictures online of schools with banners that say things like, reject foreign holidays, be a true Chinese.
Right.
It makes it sound like a national top-down order, is it?
That is the first and maybe most crucial distinction we need to make. We have to clarify the huge difference between official central government policy and local, often very enthusiastic execution.
Okay.
So, the official line. If you look at statements from major outlets, the central government has never issued a sweeping nationwide ban on celebrating Christmas. Never happened.
Really?
In fact, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will often publicly state that China respects religious freedom. To just outright ban a globally recognized holiday would be, well, diplomatically awkward.
And bad for business.
And very economically counterproductive.
So that's the diplomatic face, religious freedom.
Right.
But what's the reality on the ground?
The implementation is where the restrictions become really potent. The targets are primarily within the system.
What do you mean by the system?
This includes Communist Party members, public servants, and all public schools. These groups are strongly encouraged, often through mandatory notices or, implicit threats of an ideological review, to avoid excessive celebration of Western holidays.
And what's the official reason they give?
The stated reason is to prioritize and promote traditional culture. So it's less of a ban and more of a massive, pervasive cultural nudge.
Steering people away from public displays of Western influence.
Exactly. And then you have local enforcement. In past years, we've seen cities like Langfang explicitly ban Christmas displays in public spaces.
Right.
But they almost never cite anti-Western ideology as the reason. Instead, they use these non-ideological excuses like maintaining city appearance or ensuring ideological security.
That gives local officials plausible deniability while still achieving the goal.
It does. They actively discourage the visible signs of a Western holiday, making sure they aren't seen to be promoting foreign soft power.
So the pressure is really on the public displays, not so much what people do in their own homes.
Right.
Which makes sense if you're trying to maintain cultural and ideological control over the institutions of the state. And this fits with China's history.
Precisely. And you have to remember, this isn't some new 21st century thing invented by the current leadership. It's deeply rooted in the painful collective historical memory of the century of national humiliation.
Which was roughly 1839 to 1949.
That's right.
To get the depth of this resistance, we really need to trace that anti-Western sentiment back. How far back do we need to look to see these economic boycotts being used as political tools?
Oh, we're talking well over a century. And it's crucial to understand these movements were rarely just blind xenophobia. They were direct, practical, and highly strategic responses to foreign colonial oppression.
Unequal treaties, discriminatory policies, that kind of thing.
All of it. Let's look at a few examples. The 1905 anti-U.S. boycott was a direct response to the American Exclusion Act, which was incredibly offensive and restrictive towards Chinese immigrants.
Right.
Intellectuals used the press to call for a refusal to buy U.S. goods, and the economic pressure was significant enough that it actually influenced diplomatic negotiations on immigration.
That's a powerful tool, turning consumer choice into political leverage.
Exactly. Then you had the 1925 May 30th movement, which expanded those boycotts to British, American, and Japanese goods because of labor conflicts and foreign aggression. And of course, the big one.
The anti-Japanese boycott.
The 1931 anti-Japanese boycott after the Mukden incident, that became a huge rallying point for national unity against military occupation.
So the collective memory, the gut feeling is, when we buy their products, we empower the people who have colonized or oppressed us. Christmas symbols just happen to be the latest version of that power imbalance.
That collective memory of the Opium Wars, the destruction by the Eight-Nation Alliance, that is the nationalist fuel being used today. This framing of cultural defense is seen as a continuation of that historical struggle.
And it continued after 1949.
Absolutely. During the Cultural Revolution, the Destroy the Four Olds campaign specifically targeted and destroyed Western symbols, classifying them as, bourgeois decay.
And now, under the current leadership, that same historical resistance has just been given a modern, official rebranding.
Yes. Under Xi Jinping's emphasis on cultural confidence, it's now packaged as de-Westernization, a confident, assertive rejection of foreign influence, not a forced, fearful isolation.
It's fascinating how the government can use historical trauma, like the Eight-Nation Alliance, to create this sense of, what would you call it, national revenge or historical justice. And sociologists and political critics argue it serves a very important modern purpose.
Which is?
It transfers internal frustrations like economic pressure, local corruption, social inequality, onto a convenient, historically legitimate external enemy. So if things are tough at home, it's much safer for people to blame Nike or foreign soft power than to critique the government's own policies.
It's a textbook case of political deflection.
And this ideological framing, it doesn't just apply to history. It's impacting what people are doing right now. Let's look at the current battlegrounds. It's not just holidays, it's brands too, right?
Absolutely. The ideological push starts with holidays. You see this intense online rhetoric, slogans like rejecting foreign holidays, starting with me. They explicitly link Christmas to historical invasion, branding it a shame holiday.
That creates a lot of social pressure, especially on young people.
A huge amount. And sometimes the cultural defense gets surprisingly creative. We've seen reports that some northern Chinese cities are trying to counter the image of Western Santa Claus by promoting the Russian legend of Dead Moroz.
Strict Father Frost.
Strict Father Frost, yeah. They frame this as a tactical move in the culture war, a way to embrace a friendly, non-Western, often politically aligned winter tradition instead of the Western commercial one.
That is actually really smart strategic thinking.
Yeah.
If you can't block the cultural need for a winter celebration, you just substitute the source material with something ideologically better.
And then there's the explicit brand war. The most high-profile example recently was the 2021 Xinjiang cotton incident.
Right, with H&M and Nike.
When those Western brands released statements about Xinjiang cotton, it triggered a massive, highly coordinated public backlash. And the pattern was classic.
What was the pattern?
Official state media initiates the naming and shaming. The public and celebrities respond with this huge fervor-burning shoes, canceling contracts, and then, once the ideological point has been made, the official rhetoric just cools down.
It's like a controlled burn of nationalism.
Exactly.
The government gets to signal its strength and mobilize public loyalty without totally collapsing the supply chains or foreign investment it still needs.
Yeah.
And that's the core contradiction, isn't it?
That is the economic and cultural dilemma right there. And we should break down the two sides of the internal Chinese debate on this. Right. So you have the pro-boycott perspective, the cultural defense side. Their concerns are deeply felt. They fear their traditional identity is being eroded by Western soft power.
They worry that kids know Santa, but not Confucius.
That's the line. Youth know all about Santa Claus, but next to nothing about foundational thinkers like Confucius or Mencius. And this stance is officially cited as simple patriotism, and a response to what they see as Western double standards.
For example?
For instance, China's foreign minister has publicly challenged U.S. narratives on human rights in Xinjiang by pointing out Western silence on conflicts or abuses elsewhere, like in the Middle East. They feel like they're just responding to hypocritical pressure.
So for them, it's about leveling the moral and cultural playing field. But what about the millions of young urban Chinese who just, enjoy the holiday?
That's the pro-celebration perspective, the market reality. For young, urban Chinese, Christmas is almost entirely secularized. It has zero religious meaning. It's a date night, a huge shopping spree, and a key driver of the Q4 domestic economy.
So this group argues that resisting it actually hurts their own already fragile domestic consumption.
Exactly. When your national economy is slowing down, you probably shouldn't be telling millions of urban consumers not to spend money during a major retail event.
That is the ultimate political contradiction. You want cultural purity, but you desperately need the consumption boost that the foreign holiday brings.
The market demands secularization.
Which brings us to my favorite part of this whole thing, the most beautiful organic point of cultural fusion.
The Ping'an custom.
The peace apple. I love this example because it shows real, grassroots cultural ownership.
It's a custom totally unique to China. On Christmas Eve, young people exchange these beautifully packaged apples. The reason is purely linguistic and cultural.
It's a pun, right?
It's a perfect pun. The Mandarin word for apple, pinggong, sounds almost identical to the first two syllables of Christmas Eve, pinginye, which translates to peaceful night or silent night.
So they take the imported framework, the timing, the commercial gift-giving, but they replace the core religious meaning with the distinctly local concept of peace and good fortune, all based on their own language.
Exactly. It's a profound example of active cultural hybridization. They are taking the imported holiday and stamping it with their own unique cultural signature. It proves that cultures can adapt and remix things, not just passively submit to them.
That is a perfect pivot point, because while the East is fighting this external threat of Western culture, let's look at the West, specifically the U.S., which is having an all-out internal civil war over how to even talk about the holiday.
Right.
The U.S. internal war on Christmas is the precise mirror image of China's external resistance.
It's the same underlying anxiety over identity and cultural dominance, but it's fought over domestic vocabulary and specific traditions.
So on one side, you have the conservative stance.
Their insistence on saying Merry Christmas isn't just a greeting. It's seen as defending Christian tradition and national identity against what they call political correctness gone wild.
And this rhetoric became a massive political and media rallying cry. It wasn't just a difference of opinion, it became like a declaration of which team you're on.
It absolutely did. The phrase war on Christmas was heavily popularized by certain media outlets starting in the early 2000s, and it framed the preference for neutral greetings like Happy Holidays as an active, hostile action aimed at erasing Christianity from the public square.
And then Donald Trump really weaponized it.
He seized upon this completely. His frequent use of the phrase saying Merry Christmas again was a powerful, performative political act. It was a declaration of cultural victory that resonated so deeply with his conservative base.
The implication was clear. The liberal elite had taken away traditional American identity, and he was the one bringing it back.
It framed the simple act of choosing a greeting as defending the nation's Christian roots. If you compromise on the language, you compromise the identity. And this battle is fought through the lens of political correctness, a phrase the conservative base uses as a rhetorical weapon to label any attempt at inclusivity as an attack on freedom.
And then on the other side, you have the liberal and corporate stance.
Their preference for Happy Holidays is driven by a desire for social inclusivity. I mean, the end-of-year season in America has multiple major holidays, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, various secular celebrations.
Sure.
So for the liberal base, using Happy Holidays is just acknowledging a diverse society and respecting citizens of all faiths, or no faith at all.
And for corporations, is it about inclusivity for them?
For corporations, the motivation is twofold. They often embrace diversity as a social good, sure, but the preference for neutrality is also practical and profit-driven. It's risk mitigation.
How so?
Retail giants shifted to Happy Holidays after all those high-profile legal fights and PR crises about displaying religious symbols, like nativity scenes on public or commercial property. Neutrality just reduces legal risk and avoids alienating any potential customers.
So we end up with this massive paradox.
Yeah.
Santa's getting attacked from both sides. He's too imperialist and foreign in the East. And he's not traditional or specifically Christian enough in the West. He's criticized for his origins by one culture and for his lack of specificity by another.
He is, quite literally, caught between two geopolitical and ideological chimney walls. These debates just show that culture is never neutral. It's always an arena for defining who belongs and who holds the power.
Which brings us to the big fundamental question that's always lurking behind these culture wars. When one culture adopts elements of another, a holiday, a hairstyle, whatever, how do we tell if it's invasion or fusion? Because the difference is critical.
This is where we need to put on our academic hats for a minute and define the terms precisely. The distinction isn't always about the content itself. It's about the underlying power relationship and the acceptance mechanism by the culture that's receiving it.
Okay, so let's start with cultural invasion. Academics call it cultural imperialism, right?
Right. The definition is when a strong culture unilaterally imports its dominant values, products, and lifestyles into a weaker or subordinate culture.
Usually through massive economic power or just wall-to-wall media.
Exactly. And the key one is the marginalization or self-denial of the weaker culture's own traditions.
What are the key words we should listen for that signal it's an invasion?
The key words are unilateral, meaning the flow is mostly one way. Non-reciprocal, meaning the weaker culture can't easily export its symbols back. Coercion, whether it's economic or political pressure. And hegemony, the dominance of one perspective so completely that alternatives become almost unthinkable.
So the classic example is?
Post-WWII, U.S. exporting the American dream through Hollywood movies, Coca-Cola, and blue jeans. For many nations, this wasn't really a choice. It was a deluge of media and goods that made local products or local cinema look inferior just by comparison.
So if I'm consuming it without the ability to influence or change it, it's leaning toward invasion.
That's a perfect way to put it. Now let's look at cultural fusion, also known as hybridity or syncretism. The definition here is when two or more cultures interact, reinterpret, and create a genuinely new form based on equal footing or, most importantly, active choice, what we call localization.
The peace apple is our key example here. They actively chose to adopt the timing, but remix the meaning to fit their local language and values.
Yes. The keywords for fusion are bidirectional, meaning influence goes both ways, even if it's uneven, active choice, and localization, that process of adaptation. Other great examples are Tex-Mex food or the Vietnamese banh mi sandwich.
Right, which took the French baguette from colonialism and filled it with local ingredients.
And transformed it into something uniquely Vietnamese.
Okay, with those definitions, let's apply them to two massive global phenomena that are always debated under this lens: Japanese anime and Korean K-pop.
Perfect. These are great case studies to really nail down the distinction.
So Japanese anime, is it soft power or is it a bridge?
Well, on one hand, the invasion view is a valid critical take. Critics see anime as a deliberate post-war form of soft power Japan used to rebuild its global image.
Pivoting from a military empire to a source of kawaii or cute culture.
It's effective. It exports seemingly universal values like friendship and passion, which makes the country seem less threatening. But the deeper criticism, the distortion part, is that it can promote aesthetic escapism.
What do you mean?
Well, we see reports that 40% of U.S. teens are exposed to anime. And some alarming data from certain studies suggested a significant portion of young Japanese males preferred 2D partners.
Wow.
Which suggests it could potentially distort young people's emotional connection to reality, leading to social isolation. That's a core critique of cultural invasion. It replaces reality with a highly produced fantasy from somewhere else.
But the fusion view is incredibly powerful here, too, because of the global fan engagement.
It is. The success of anime is totally market-driven, and it relies on what we call cross-cultural resonance. Global fan culture is deeply involved in secondary creation.
Like fan fiction cosplay.
Elaborate cosplay, fan-made art. Fans don't just consume the product. They actively blend Japanese styles with their own local languages, humor, and their own stories. When fans use anime aesthetics to tell their own non-Japanese stories, that's localization. The industry's massive, over 2.9 trillion yen. That suggests people are actively choosing and remixing, not just passively accepting.
Okay, case study 2. K-pop and the forehead curler trend. This is so specific, I love it.
The invasion distortion view sees K-pop as a systemic cultural export. It's a highly capital-driven industry supported by government strategy and huge conglomerates like SM and YG. They create a single, incredibly strict, globally exported beauty standard.
Perfect skin, precise features, intense choreography.
And this system relentlessly promotes that single vision of beauty, which can lead to massive aesthetic anxiety globally. And that anxiety then boosts the expansion of the Korean plastic surgery industry. It's an aggressive, non-reciprocal economic pipeline that creates a kind of cultural dependency.
And the forehead curler is the perfect visual for that, right? That 60% imitation rate in places like Thailand and Vietnam you mentioned. That level of imitation is criticized as ugly or grotesque by some older locals. They see it as cultural imperialism diluting their own beauty standards.
Absolutely. And there's a secondary critique about the origin of the culture itself.
The borrowing from Black culture.
Critics point out K-pop's historical debt to hip-hop and R&B, often stripping those influences of their historical context and selling them globally as a purely Koreanized commercial product without, adequate credit.
But K-pop fans are quick to defend it as fusion. They argue that every music genre is a hybrid.
They do, and they have a strong case. K-pop itself is a hybrid product. It's a mix of U.S. R&B and hip-hop structure, Japanese idol training systems, all localized through tight Korean choreography and fashion.
It's the ultimate high-quality, industrialized entertainment product tailored for a global audience that actively seeks it out.
And fans choose and pay for that quality. When BTS's RM made an analogy for K-pop, he compared it to bibimbap mixed rice. He argued that combining diverse ingredients creates new value that unites youth across the globe.
So what's the final judgment? How do you draw the line?
The ultimate question, the line between fusion and invasion, is whether the participant loses their subjectivity.
Subjectivity.
If you passively accept the foreign element and can't transform it, if it leads to self-denial or feeling that your own traditions are inferior, it's leaning strongly toward invasion. You become a mere recipient.
But if you actively choose the element and remix it into something new.
Like creating the peaceable custom or taking anime aesthetics and applying them to your own local art, that is fusion. It's about being the chef, not just the passive diner.
This has been a fascinating journey through ideology, history, and pop culture. But when we strip away all the rhetoric, the nationalist anxieties in the East, the identity politics in the West, who is Santa Claus really working for? Who signs his toe checks?
My ultimate empirical conclusion is that Santa chooses capitalism. Not China, not the U.S., but the global market system that sustains them both.
The ultimate dual loyalty dilemma resolved by a cold, hard spreadsheet.
The economic truth of 2025 is pretty stark. Regardless of whether a government calls itself communist or democratic, they're all bound by global economic realities. And economic predictions for the coming years show global consumption is predicted to slow down significantly. Consumer spending is fragile.
Which raises a big question.
In a climate of anticipated global slowdown, which impacts manufacturing hubs like China and consumer markets like the U.S., both Beijing and Washington implicitly need people to spend money.
The hypocrisy comes full circle.
Mm-hmm.
China might tell party members not to celebrate a Western holiday, but they desperately need those young secular consumers to buy gifts and go on dates to stimulate the retail sector.
Exactly. The official policy of de-Westernization bumps up hard against the practical, urgent need for economic activity. Retail analysts often note that the spending habits of younger Chinese consumers are increasingly detached from ideological concerns. Their holiday spending is a life raft for fragile domestic markets.
The government can ban public displays, but it can't ban the internal desire to spend money, which helps the state.
Right.
And meanwhile, in the U.S., regardless of whether a business says Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, the entire fourth quarter is just dedicated to maximizing profit. The language is just window dressing for the sales targets that drive the economy.
The red suit might be a symbol of imperial soft power to one side or a symbol of Christian tradition to the other, but fundamentally it is the color of retail, of sales targets, and Q4 revenue maximization. It is the uniform of global consumption.
And I think that's the perfect final word on this. Maybe we should stop asking where Santa's from and start asking who he's working for. Spoiler alert, it's the economy.
In a polarized world, a red suit means different things to different people. But inside the suit, it's just a wish for happiness or a sales target.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought for you, our learner listeners. Given what we established, that about 70% of global cultural output is hybrid, the lesson isn't to fear external influence. The lesson is to practice active balance.
Yes. How do we make sure our aesthetic experiments, whether it's a passion for anime, adopting K-pop trends, or celebrating a foreign holiday, how do we make sure those things make us richer and more diverse in our self-expression, rather than simply making us passively follow a single foreign standard?
It requires us to be the critical thinkers, the selectors, and the remixers of culture. Don't just passively eat the bibimbap, learn to cook it yourself. That was an incredibly complex exploration of global politics and culture.
I hope our listeners feel well-armed for their next holiday debate, knowing the real conflict is often structural, not just personal.
And to you, our listeners, if you enjoyed this discussion on cultural power and geopolitics, please make sure you hit subscribe to Sip&Talk wherever you get your audio fix. We love seeing our community grow.
We also want to give a shout out to our old friend, Mickey. If you're looking for a dose of fun memes, some excellent spirits-tasting reviews, and travel vlogs, check out his YouTube channel, Mickytolife.
Go support that man. Hit that like button or subscribe. And tell him you mentioned the Sip&Talk recommendation. We promise you will not regret it.
From both of us, we wish you a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. And Ethan, make sure you prepare more eggnog for the next recording session. Goodbye, everyone.